believer in the adage that the best camera is the camera that you have in your hands. This camera that I now have in my hand is the Canon EOS 350D. This camera was released in February 2005. Therefore, at the time I'm making this video, it's around about 16 years old. Quick run through the specifications. It has got an 8 megapixel sensor. It's a crop sensor, so the sensor size is 22.2 millimeters by 14.8 meters. It's got a Digit 2 image processor. The LCD screen on the back is a quite small 1.8 inch. It takes EF or EFS lenses. It's autofocus. It has got through the lens autofocusing, which has got 7 focus points. You can of course use it as manual focus. The shutter speeds are bulb and then 30 seconds to 1/4000th of a second, and the ISO range is 100 to 1600. It has a built-in pop-up flash. If you were to look at other Canon cameras at the time, the nearest comparable camera, which is slightly better, would be the 20D. So this is complete with the 18 to 55 millimeter kit lens. Storage on this particular camera is through compact flash. If I press this button here, it releases the memory card, and this memory card is 2 gigabytes. You'll see that the LCD screen at the back is in fact quite small, but it has quite a useful little window above to show you whether or not your shot is going to be properly exposed or not. It is of course a multi-mode single lens reflex digital camera. So to have a little look at the modes. ADEP means that if you put the camera on this setting, it will set the camera up to give you the maximum depth of field for the image that you're photographing. So for instance, a crowd of people or a row of things on the table. Manual is more interesting. Manual means that you control both the aperture and the shutter speed. Now if I turn it on, and I don't know how well you can see this, but the command dial at the front is changing the aperture. No, it's not. The command dial is changing the shutter speed. If I'd like to change the aperture, I have to press this button, which is AV, and then I can change the aperture. At the moment, because it's pointed at the table, there's no way I'm going to get the correct aperture. But now we're down to bulb. So let's open shutter, close shutter, and massively overexposed image. If, however, I put it onto the next one, which is aperture value, then the camera automatically selects the shutter speed for the aperture value that you have selected. So you select the aperture that you want to shoot at, for instance f8, and the camera works out the shutter speed that matches it. TV, time value, or shutter priority, does the opposite. the camera selects the aperture which matches the shutter speed which you want to shoot at. So you shoot at, say, say 125th of a second, and the camera will sort out the aperture for you, assuming that there's sufficient light. Program. Well, program, you can select very little. The camera will sort out the shutter speed and the aperture. The exception to that is that if you press the AV button, then you can under and overexpose it, and if you release the AV button, you can change the shutter speed and the aperture. So if the camera thinks it should be 125th at f8, but you'd rather shoot at 250th at f5.6, you can use the command dial to alter the shutter speed aperture combination that the camera has already calculated. If you want to deliberately under or overexpose your shot, you press the AV button, and that allows you to lock the shutter speed and change the aperture. The next control on the dial at the top is the magic green button. This means that you have no control over the exposure at all. The computer inside the camera works it all out for you. Moving on to portrait mode. Portrait mode selects a wide aperture and a faster shutter speed so that your portraits are in focus, whereas your background is out of focus. Landscape does the opposite. It selects a minimum aperture and therefore a longer shutter speed, which is why many photographers who do landscapes really like to use a tripod. Macro assumes you're going to be on the minimum focusing distance of your camera and sets up the camera to best take photographs of such things such as plants. Sports, again, assumes that you're going to be taking pictures of high-speed objects which you want to freeze the motion, so it selects the top shutter speed. The nighttime photography mode on this one is quite interesting because it allows you to fire a flash at someone who's quite close and leaves the shutter speed open enough to record detail in the background. So if you had someone standing in front of, for argument's sake, a church, you use this mode, the pop-up flash illuminates them, then the shutter may be open for another 4 or 5 seconds to show the detail in the church. The downside of this, of course, is that the person has to stand very still. Otherwise you're going to get a sharp image of the person illuminated by the flash with a sort of fuzzy outline as they are naturally moving backwards and forwards, and that could just simply be breathing. The last dial on here simply turns the flash off. So if you're in a place where you cannot use flash, this setting will make sure that you can't use flash. So if you're in a rock concert or you're up in the eaves of a sports hall where the flash would never reach the action, then this is quite a useful setting. Last thing to do is to dig out some pictures. I have got loads of pictures on my computer that was taken with this type of camera. I can't actually show many of them because they were taken within a school setting. A couple of years ago I was lucky enough to teach in a school where every photography student was loaned a Canon camera. That's actually really quite impressive. Some of them were these 350Ds, some of them were 400Ds, which is the upgrade for this, where we've gone from 8 megapixels to 10 megapixels, but they all operate in much the same way. And I have a substantial number of images which were taken with Canon cameras, either by myself or by students during that period of time. I'll sort out half a dozen or so, stick them in the gallery. Is it still a nice camera? I always contend that if you're a photographer, you can use anything. If you've been looking at other cameras that I review on my channel, you will know that I like old cameras, and I've used cameras which have been as little as 0.4 megapixels. I actually think that although the technology massively helps people, it massively helps people who aren't very good at photography. So if you're a photographer and you know what you're doing, then there is absolutely no reason why you can't get perfectly acceptable shots out of a camera like this. If you're a beginner or you really haven't got a clue about photography, then yeah, you really do need to buy the latest kit, because that is going to allow you to take decent photographs without understanding what's going on at all. I think that's a bit of a pity, but that's the way the world is going. So for me, this is a nice little camera. Whether or not it'd be a nice little camera for you really depends on two factors. One is your knowledge about photography, and the second one is the piece of glass that goes on the front. If you have good glass, you will get better image quality. If you have the kit lens, you will get okay image quality, and okay is much better than most people actually need. If you want to get top quality out of a camera like this, it is possible, and this is an absolutely lovely studio camera. Out in the wilds, I would have no problem using this along with, say, a 70 to 200s lens. I think that would be a fantastic thing to go out and take pictures of sort of fairly close wildlife, fairly big wildlife. But I actually quite like this camera, and I say that as a Nikon user. I think this actually is a perfectly acceptable camera, and for not very much money. You know, I don't know, maybe 75 to £100 will get you this camera, and if you can get that along with some cheap second-hand Canon lenses, you've got the core of a beautiful, beautiful system. Right, I'm going to see if I can find some images, but this is the Canon EOS 350D